Parsha Korach. Dum. A bad man. How does a bad man get his name? He got his name in a parsha. Parsha is all about a bad man.
What's his name?
Bad guy. 820. 820. Vayikach Korach ben Yitzhar ben Kohos ben Levi v'Dosan v'Aviram ben Eliyav v'On ben Pelas ben Reuven. Let's try it in English. See if it makes any more sense than it does in Hebrew. Korach, son of Yitzhar, son of Kohat, son of Levi, separated himself with Datan and Aviram, sons of Eliyav, and On ben Pelas, the offspring of Reuven. Now, in Hebrew, it doesn't say separate. In Hebrew, it says Vayikach. So what does Vayikach mean? To take. So, since the pasuk has a verb, all verbs have an object, isn't that right? If you do something, you're either doing something with something or to something, there's an object to the action, right? If you spoke to someone. If you lifted a table. You didn't plain lift, you lifted a table. You didn't plain, if you jumped, you didn't just jump, you jumped for a purpose. If you ate, I want to know what you ate. Point is that if there's an action, I want to know what you did. So I say, Jess, you took blah, 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 and it doesn't say what you took. Isn't that a little strange? That's not strange.
What?
Isn't that a little strange?
Yeah, it is.
I mean, he took. What did he take? What did he take, for goodness sake? I mean, give me a, do you understand that? The word separation in the English is not a fair word. It's not a fair word at all. Lily, you got to put that back on. I'm sorry. Sorry. But we'll make it cool around here. We'll keep it cool. Because I can't guarantee my hot air, but I mean, we'll see about that. Okay, so the word separate, the English translation of separate is not incorrect. Don't get me wrong. It's not incorrect. It is correct because there's a deeper meaning to the word take. And if you think about it, he took what? He took himself.
Yes.
Very good. That's a smart man. I didn't know you were that smart. I didn't know you were that smart. You didn't know either. We're both discovering it. Korach took himself. And in taking yourself, it really means to take away yourself, or take yourself away from everybody else. And that's why that's what the English translates it accurately. He separated himself. Now, Rashi wants to say also another pshat, that he took a bad deal for himself. The word to take, lokeach, also means a mekach. A mekach is the noun of the word take. How do you make that? How do you make a noun out of take? A taken item. Am I right? A taken item is what you took. So a taken item is a noun. So he took an item, and the item was a deal. We call a mekach a deal because generally speaking, when you talk about deals in Judaism business, you talk about mekach or memkar, to take and to sell. Someone sells, the other person takes or buys. In fact, the word kach means to take, can also mean to buy. A mekach is a purchase. That's why we say that a man, yikach ishisha, a man takes for himself a wife, he purchases a wife. He assumes the possession of her and all the responsibility and obligations and and sometimes difficulties that may arise because of it. In other words, it is he who must assume and stand up to assume full responsibility and charge for the success of this marriage. It is obviously true that the woman also has to play her part, but her part is a lot less definitive. It's not that substantial. In other words, her role is very simple: be a good wife. The man's role is far more demanding. Go out, get a job, work hard, be responsible. Your wife's feelings has to be cared for. You have to make sure that she's loved and protected and safe and so forth and so on. But the woman's is just be a good helpmate. Your husband's out there, working hard and doing what he's got to do, and in there and moving and grooving and doing what he's got to do, and you need to be there for him. That's it. That means that all his needs have to be met. I mean, he has to have dinner on the table when he comes home. He has to have clean clothing. He has to have a nice house that's clean, and all the other things that make a man's home his sanctuary or his safety net, so that he can go out the next morning and perform properly in whatever he's doing to make a living. It was very, very common for most rabbis in the Talmud to call their wives their bayit. She is my home. Basically, therefore, he must make an acquisition. So the word lokeach doesn't always mean just simply take, it means also to purchase. Sometimes you take something for nothing, it's free, and sometimes you have to pay for it. And that's a wife. that ain't free. But either way, that's business. Mekach or memkar. You've heard that phrase before, mekach or memkar? It's business, give and take. Selling and buying. And we want to say here that Korach took a bad deal. Business is a deal. He got a bad deal on this. But mekach ra la'atzmo. He took the bad deal on his own. No one forced him into the bad deal. He was a big fat dummy. And that's why he got into a deal which caused him all the harm that came to him because of it. But he took himself away from everybody else in separation. So you got a couple of problems here with Korach off the top. Obviously his separation, his taking of himself, as we said, lokach atzmo, that Shai said, and then the other commentaries, lokach mekach ra atzmo, he took a bad deal for himself. In other words, you got yourself into a bad situation by doing the separation. But these are the beginnings of the problems of Korach. Korach also, however, took some people with him. He took Dasan and Aviram, Datan and Aviram. Dasan and Aviram are two of the most historical sources of what is known today as the Erev Rav. What's an Erev Rav? That's a group of people, lots of them, Rav. Erev means the Mu'urav. They are connected, interconnected. There's a group of people that are just becoming whatever they can do to be problem causers within the community. You have a nice community, maybe people for the most part get along, and then there's always a few rabble-rousers, we call them in English, rabble-rousers, bad guys who just don't want to see peace or harmony and do whatever they can to cause discord, arguments, anger, and all sorts of things of that nature. So Korach picks up Dasan and Aviram. Now Dasan and Aviram, as I said, are historical bums. These guys are bad from day one. So let's go back and find out how bad. Aviram is like his partner. Datan is the real bad guy. Let's find out about Datan. Let's go back to the beginning of the second book of the Torah, Shemot, in which we, right here, I've got one. Now, in this book over here, we begin with the story of slavery. In the story of slavery, which begins on page 292, we find that funny thing, we don't find, I beg your pardon, we don't find it as clear as it's supposed to say. But anyway, in 298, Moshe grows up, as you can see at the beginning. Moshe, the young Egyptian prince, grows up, goes out to his brothers, the Jews, and feels their burdens, and sees an Egyptian man hitting a Hebrew. He feels that that's his brethren, his brother, and he turns around, he sees nobody around, and he kills the Egyptian, and he buries him in the sand. The next day, verse 13, he goes out and beholds two Hebrew men fighting. Hey guys, why would you strike your own fellow? The Egyptians are bad enough to us. We need to fight amongst each other. We got enough problems with those Arabs around. We want to Israelis. What are you doing? You're fighting with each other. You're crazy. So he says over here, he says, why would you hit your own man? And they responded and said, who appointed you a dignitary and ruler and judge over us? You want to murder us like you murdered the Egyptian? And Moshe was afraid. It doesn't say quite clearly as I thought it did, which means that my memory failed me. But the two men that were fighting were Datan and Aviram. And Rashi says it quite clearly. Rashi says it quite clearly now that the he doesn't bring it down here in the commentary either, but clearly, Rashi says these were the two guys were Datan and Aviram. So these are the guys that fight amongst each other. What does that mean, fight amongst each other? Again, there's this fighting, there's, what?
He does say that on the commentary.
Where do you see it? Together to decide what to do. We're being oppressed here. We're being thrown into ghettos with this happening, that's happening. What should we do? And as usual, tragically, that's a genetic Jewish trait. It's in the genes. And I guess if you convert, you probably get those genes too. Once you come out of the mikveh, we fight. We argue. One group says this, the other group says that. Let's do this, let's do that. Put two Jews in a row, they come out with three opinions. So, of course, as the Jewish people are leaving Mitzrayim, if you'll turn the page, they're leaving Egypt, and turn to now Parshas Korach. Paro finally sends them out. 10 plagues, and he's done. Get out of here. Take a look at 366. It happens that Paro sends out the people that God did not lead them by the way of the land of Philistines, and he led them a different way. But Paro sends them out. 367, after all those things, all those plagues, the Jews finally leave. Is that correct? Now take a look over here on page take a look at page, the bottom of page 369. Egypt, the bottom of the page, page 9, passage 9, where it says on the side, Israel panics. Everyone see that? Egypt pursued them, overtook them, encamped by the sea. all the horses and chariots of Paro and his horsemen and army by Piach he rode before Baal Tzfon. Okay, it's nervous time. Okay, next page, 371, verse 10. Let's go, read. Paro approached. The children of Israel raised their eyes, and behold, Egypt was journeying after them, and they were very frightened. The children of Israel cried out to Hashem. They said to Moshe, "Were there no graves in Egypt? You took us to die in the wilderness. What is it you've taken us out of Egypt?" I mean, goodness. Took us out of Egypt. Here the Egyptians come chasing after us, and there's the sea on the other side. What are we going to do? So, God's assurance in verse 13, in the middle of 371. Moshe told the people, "Do not fear. Stand fast. See the salvation of Hashem that he shall perform for you today. For as you have seen Egypt today, you shall not ever see them again. Hashem will make war for you, and you shall remain silent." We see over here that the Jews broke into 4 different arguments. Where Moshe said to the people, "Do not fear. Stand fast and you'll see the salvation of Hashem." Those people had made a conscious decision to do X. You figure out what X is. Then he said, "For as you have seen Egypt today, you shall not see them again." Moshe addressed a different group who had decided to do Y. Figure out what Y is. Hashem will make war for you. He addressed a third group who had thought about Z. You know X, Y, Z? And you shall remain silent. He addressed the fourth group. What did each group want to do? In other words, we're going to learn by implication what Moshe told these groups were. These are 4 different statements here, the 4 different groups, because there are 4 different approaches to the problem. What's the problem? We're surrounded. The sea on one side, the Egyptians on the other. What are we going to do? Says one group, blah, 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 blah. Says Moshe, "Don't fear. Watch the salvation of Hashem." Says the next group, blah, 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 blah. He says, "Well, you see Egypt? Egypt was finished." Third group, blah, 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 blah. Hashem says, Moshe says, "Hashem will make war." Fourth group says, blah, 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 blah. And Moshe says, "You remain silent." Okay, what's the first group want to do? Run. Okay? Run where? Run where? Say it again.
Into the sea.
Into the sea. They're prepared to commit suicide. They're frightened so strongly that Moshe's got to tell them, "Don't be afraid." These are people ready to commit suicide. Then he says to the next group, "Whatever you see about Egypt, you shall never see them again." What do they say? They say,
Go back to them, join.
let's go back to Egypt. That's the second alternative. He says to them, "Well, you think Egypt's an alternative? You'll see what we do to them, what Hashem does to them, you'll never see Egypt again." Okay? What's the third group say? Moshe says to them, "Hashem will make war for you." What do they want to do? Say it again. They want to fight. And Moshe tells them, "No, Hashem said, he will make war." Fourth group, he says, "Remain silent." What do they want to do? No. What do they want to do? If he tells them to remain silent, what do they want to do by implication? The opposite. Not talk.
Peace talks.
They wanted to dominate. Yeah, they wanted to dominate. There were no idiots with peace talks in those days. That's the insanity of today's world. So 4 groups. One completely given up, goes to suicide. Hashem tells them, "Don't worry." The other group says, "Let's go back to Egypt and become slaves again." Hashem tells them again, "Don't worry, I'm taking care of Egypt. We're going to destroy Egypt today." Third group says, "Let's fight." Hashem says, "Nope, no fighting today. Hashem will fight for you." Third group says, "Let's join Sahel." Says, "There's nothing to it. Hashem does the fighting today." Fourth group says, "Let's go to David. Learn. Say Tehillim." Keep silent. No davening today. Now, the fact that we learn from this that there are four groups, broke into four groups, indicates again the tragedy of our people. We fight with each other. Even the most, here we are being attacked, and we don't have a consensus of what to do. I mean, this is really, I mean, I think Jews need a psychiatrist or something. I mean, it's a problem here. But clearly, between these four groups, two of them are more negative, and two of them are more positive. Who are the two positive groups? Fighting with Daven. The other two, Shem stands up for them. You guys are losers. I mean, really. I mean, you really are losers. I mean, you give up. You want to jump in the sea. You're a loser. I mean, you want to go back to Egypt after all that slavery. But that Hashem tells them to keep quiet, I understand. But then Hashem tells the Daveners to keep quiet too. Hashem tells the fighters to stop fighting. Why would Hashem tell two positive groups? It's a good thing to fight the enemy, no? And it's even a better thing to daven. And Hashem said doesn't want either of them. Why not?
He doesn't want to stop them.
Say it.
He doesn't want to stop them.
Why? He does want to stop them. It's, Hashem, atem tacharishun, you keep quiet. I don't want to hear you davening. No davening now. I don't want to hear you fighting either. But we're ready. We got a good army. We're ready to fight. Nope, don't want it. Why does Hashem tell them that?
Because he's about to show them a miracle of...
Right, no question about it. He's about ready. He says, guys, this is my show. This is my show. Right? But it's deeper. What it really means is that davening is great. And fighting is even great too. Problem is, I got 1/4 of a nation fighting, 1/4 of a nation davening. The davening is ineffective, and the fight is ineffective. I can't fight if the nation isn't unified to fight together. And I can't daven if the nation isn't unified to daven together. We got to do things together. We got to work together, not fight with each other. And then, of course, when Jews do fight with each other and cause themselves all these problems, who has to step in and save us? Hashem. But we have to understand this and be honest with ourselves and realize our problems and realize the tragedy of Jewish disunity. Now, we come to the golden calf. Whoa, that's a bad one, right? The Jews are all now with the golden calf, and at the golden calf, once again, Datan stands up. I can't remember where I find it, but Datan stands up and says he wants a golden calf. He wants to. He says, "Let's not listen to God. Let's listen to Moshe anymore. Let's not listen to God who will take us out of Egypt and this Torah business. Let's forget all this stuff." And again, we don't see his name specifically here, but clearly, he's behind this rebellion against Hashem to worship a golden calf. Going back to our parsha, Datan and Aviram become real compatriots and real partners to Korach, and Datan and Aviram join in. Another opportunity to fight. Another opportunity to be rebellious, an opportunity to challenge Moshe Rabbeinu, challenge Hashem. Datan and Aviram are right in the front there. Then along came a man named On Ben Veles, and he joined in with Bnei Ruvain, with the chat with the offspring of Ruvain, and they stood up in front of Moshe. And the people were 250 strong leaders. Once again, we got those leaders. Remember those leaders last week? How they messed up? Leaders, men of renown, and those that always called for important meetings. So that's the way you define leadership. Men of renown, they're well known. They're called for important meetings, right, like congressmen or senators, and they are people that are leaders and represent a fair segment of people, whether it's a state or a district or whatever that you represent. Now the word in verse 3, they gathered together against Moshe. The Hebrew, vayikohalu, that's to make a group, kahal. And in doing so, they did it al Moshe, the al Aaron. What's al? On them. In other words, we are congregating on you. We're confronting you. We're facing off with you. It's just a direct argument. There's no discussion in the matter. It's just a pure argument. There's no attempt to try and reconciliate. There's no attempt to try and solve the problem. It is a direct confrontation, clear as day. And he says, and they say to him, "It's too much for you. The entire assembly, all of them, that's us, all of us, the Jewish people, are all holy, and Hashem is amongst them. Why do you exalt yourselves over the congregation of Hashem?" So, I mean, is it pretty clear that he is trying to challenge his leadership? I mean, that's self-evident, right? Self-evident. He gathered these 250 who supposedly are supposed to represent everybody else. And he says to them, look, you don't have a right to exalt yourselves over the congregation of Hashem, because the entire, and that's too much for you. You're taking too much honor and too much position for yourself, too much authority, too much power. For the entire assembly, all of them are holy, and Hashem is amongst them. That means to say what? That we are all a holy people. We're great people. We're all leaders in our own right. We're all presidents and senators and governors. You know that one time the Prime Minister of Israel met with the President of the United States. The President of the United States said, you know, you're a small country. What do you got there? 6-7 million people. I got 200 million people. I got more responsibility than you got. The President told the Prime Minister of Israel. So the Prime Minister responded and said, well, you may have 200 million people, but I got 6 million presidents. Every one of them thinks he's a president. Everyone thinks he's the Rosh Mמשala. Now the fact is that that's what he's saying. We're all great and holy and big and leader of leadership quality. Who made you the leader? I'm as good as you. The next guy's as good as me. Everybody's as good as everybody.
Rabbi?
Yeah.
I'm really surprised, though, about Korah's response, because this seems to be, it seems out of context. It seems like there must be a larger context that is...
I don't think there's a response so far. I don't see Moshe Rabbeinu talking yet.
No, what I mean is Korah's, everything he's doing and saying seems to be a response to something.
And the answer is?
I mean,
It's a response to?
it's a response to...
To nothing.
Is it?
What does that tell you?
Or
What does it tell you? He initiated this. He started it. If he couldn't fight with Moshe Rabbeinu, he'll find someone else to fight with. And if he can't find someone to fight with, he'll look in the mirror and fight with himself. Guy loves to fight. Guy loves an argument. You never met people like that in your life?
Yeah.
If you just want to win the argument, you know, just for winning's sake.
It's true, but even in his statement, why do you exalt yourselves? He seems to be...
He's
implying-
coming after them. They're not coming after him.
I guess my question, to be more specific, is he in some way responding to what had just happened at the end of the Parsha before?
With the Merabi.
Yeah, with the man picking up sticks and the judgments against him.
Okay,
and,
but the bottom
and
line,
he
the
even
bottom line
responding to
is.
the command
Okay, so we
Tzitzit?
what?
Is he even like taking issue with Tzitzit? Like, is he just
Right. He's taking a lot of issues.
Yeah.
But he's using them all for one purpose, for himself. To aggrandize himself. That's what it is. I mean, so obviously he attacked halacha also, like Gemara says. Gemara says that when you look at a leader, he stands up, let's say, we got 100 people in a room and one person is the rabbi. So he's the leader, shall we say. So the one person is exalted above everybody else, that's true. But he's like the tip of the mountain. The people like a group is like a mountain, so to speak. And then there's the tip of it, the top, shall we say. So he said, you know, a person has a home, beautiful home, loads of furniture. But the one thing that stands on the top of his home is his mezuzah. That little scroll that says Shema Yisrael. That's the top of the house. And of course, you'll find some people who won't think that way. They'll spend all that kind of money for furniture and try to get as cheap a mezuzah as possible. And you should be getting the most expensive mezuzah. Anybody buys a mezuzah less than $50 has bought a mezuzah. That's not really worth a whole lot. The mezuzah is the most important part of the house. Well, in the mezuzah, we have the scroll. It's a scroll written on parchment, just like a Sefer Torah, and it's written in quill and ink, just like if you were writing a Torah. So now, what would be if, let's say, we replaced the furniture, but we filled the house with not one Torah, but 100 Torahs. I said, I got 100 Torahs in the house. Does the 100 Torah house, each Torah, mind you, contains the Shema, right? The same Shema as the mezuzah, right? Does the 100 Torah house need a mezuzah?
Yeah, yes.
You say yes. He asked why. If the whole idea is to get a scroll in with the Shema, I got the whole scroll, not just an excerpt, and I got 100 of them. Who needs a mezuzah? So obviously what we learn from here is that there is this need for something to be the top of the crest, shall we say, in order to be able to signify the direction of that home. And in order to sense from it the reflection to the rest of the house. The mezuzah reflects the rest of the house. House can have 200 Torahs in it, doesn't matter. You need something to reflect it, something that gives you a glimpse of what it's all about. Now, everybody knows that you should wear tzitzis. Everybody also knows that the tzitzis is supposed to have one string of bluish thread, chelet. How about, he said, if that's going to, let's say, be the tip-off of the garment, to make the garment holy, to make the garment tzitzit, talit. So I have an idea, let's make the whole garment out of bluish thread, because the bluish thread was the real main goal anyway of the tzitzit, and we don't need the tzitzit anymore at the end at the corners of the garment. And of course that was a mistake as well, and that was an attempt to use faulty logic to simply challenge the basic accepted principles of observance, halakha. So did Korach try to change the halakha? Sure he did. Do we have groups in America today that try to change the halakha? Sure we do. But there is a goal for that. There's a purpose. They have an agenda why they want to change the halakha. Why did the Reform Conservative want to change the halakha? Because you see, by changing the halakha, then they put into question the authority of the current rabbis who have basically directed us in the halakha and have given us the direction and the guidance that we need how to observe the halakha. And therefore, if they come up with a new halakha, they have to come up with new leadership, new authorities, new teachers, new rabbis, new jobs. I got a new job. So all of a sudden, there's a lot of personal interest in there, isn't there? Yeah.
But I like what he said about reflecting on the previous Parsha, because this is a rebellion, right?
Right.
And if the leadership in the previous Parsha were the ones that sort of led everybody astray or attempted to lead everyone astray, then this could be looked at as a rebellion against that leadership, right?
No, because it says directly on Moshe. It went after Moshe, no different than the previous rebellion did.
But if he's saying like we're all leaders, isn't he sort of challenging all of the? I mean, you said last week that all of the spies were considered tzaddikim, they were considered
Right. And these guys are also considered men of great renown. The problem is that what you see undercover doesn't necessarily mean what you get inside. And these are people who seek leadership on the faulty premises, on the faulty points. In other words, basically, the attack is twice. It's against the technical details of halakha. The technical details of halakha. Everybody knows that you have to fast Yom Kippur. But, we can make a few little... Everybody knows you should keep Shabbat. Is there anybody in the world, any Jew in the world that thinks that Shabbat is anything but Friday night and Saturday? There isn't a Jew in the world that... Everybody knows it's Friday night and Saturday, right? Everybody. Do you know that there was once an attempt made by the Reform movement back in 1881 in Pittsburgh to try and change Shabbat to Sunday for Jews? Did you hear that? I mean, is that insanity or what? They were defeated. But then the Reform said, we should change the language of prayer because nobody understands Hebrew. It never dawned on them that maybe people should learn Hebrew. So therefore they got the whole Siddur in English. But then they felt that a religious service should show respect. And everybody knows Christians show respect. Since you want to be like the Christians, everyone takes off his hat. So therefore, no one in a Reform temple wore a kippah. Nowadays, they're beginning to wear it again. But in those days, they took it off. It was an attempt to go against the details of halakha. So let's put it this way. Let's be more easy. That's crazy. But I want to say it. How about a very simple one? Do conservative Jews believe that Shabbat, you should make Kiddush on Friday night? Certainly they do. Do conservative Jews believe you should go to temple and synagogue Shabbat morning? Certainly they do. Do the conservatives believe they should take the Torah and read the Torah on Shabbat? Certainly they do. But the conservatives also believe that if you live far, you should drive on Shabbat to Beit HaKnesset. However, says the conservative rabbi, you should not drive to shop. You should not drive to the golf course. But you may drive to the shul. That's a new halakha. What's their makor? What's their source? In other words, the attempt to change the halakha is on those details. It's a detail. Should you drive or shouldn't you drive? Now, basically, we understand that the detail of prohibiting driving was made on a basic sound logic. Everybody knows that when you turn on the ignition, you're lighting a fire. The Torah says, "Lo tavau reish b'mishvatechem yom Shabbat." You're not allowed to burn fire in the house on Shabbat. Then in the story, well, maybe it only says it in your house. Maybe outside your house you can do it. I mean, the argumentation, which is what our problem is here, is endless. It's endless. And so, all of a sudden, things are being challenged. So I once told a conservative rabbi, I said, do you have I was playing with him, I said, do you have a Torah in your shul? Of course we do. Do you read the Torah? Of course we do. Do you take the Torah out and with a procession kiss the Torah before we bring it to the bima? So of course we do. Let's see here. It says over here, do not burn fire on Shabbat. How do you read that? I mean, you're reading that to your congregation when you don't believe in it. And I found about a whole bunch of problems in this mitzvah you don't believe in, that mitzvah you don't believe in, this mitzvah you don't believe in. And I said to him, you got a lot of problems here. You're reading from a document you don't believe in. You're parading and kissing and revering and loving a document that you have challenged half of its validity. Half of it's truth. You don't believe in it. You think it's wrong. I mean, if I knew there was a book that I disagreed with, would I parade with that book? Would I kiss that book? No, toss it. But you're parading, hypocrisy. You love this book, you make everyone kiss it, and you read from it what you don't believe in. So I said to him, I'll solve your problem. I see you have a major problem here. So here's the solution. I'll get a scissors, and every part of the Torah that you don't believe in, I'll cut it out. And I cut that out, and I'll cut that out, and I'll cut that one out, and I'll cut that one out. Boy, there's not much left. Cutting this, cutting that. Right? So I said to him, now you have a holy Torah. Loaded with holes. There's got to be some degree of respect for the letter of the law. Yeah, of course we appreciate the need for the spirit of the law, but the details are important too. Details are understood to be mitzvot. And we talked about it even the other day when we were talking about conversion. We talked about Sunday when we asked the convert, do you accept all the 613? The convert hopefully says yes. So then we say to the convert, do you accept even those mitzvot that are very hard and difficult and challenging? And of course we hope the convert says yes. Then we ask him the harder question. We say, do you accept all of those mitzvot that are known to be relatively easy, small, maybe not so challenging? Maybe you might ignore them, forget them, neglect them, and think they're not that important. And hopefully the convert candidate says, yes, even something small would still be equally as important to me as something large. That being the case, what are you seeing? You're seeing that the sense of detail of halakha is extremely important. Yes, we are careful with a cup of tea on Shabbat, whether we put the water in first or the tea first. Because if you put the tea in first in the water and the tea bag first, and then you pour the water on it, the water's too hot and can possibly cook up the tea bag, and it's cooking on Shabbat. And there's a difference whether you put the tea bag in first or you put the water in first. And for halakha, you should put the water in first. And we preoccupy ourselves with that. Can't you think of other more important things to learn about? Yeah and no. This is pretty important too. You know? This is pretty important too. So it comes out that the whole idea of trying to essentially be religiously loyal and ne'aman to the details of halakha is an extremely important part of our religion. Korach challenged that for sure. But he challenged more than that. He challenged deeper. He challenged the right to change the halakha because he wanted the authority to do that. And he wanted to take away the authority from Moshe Rabbeinu. So when there's a group called the Rabbinical Assembly of America, the conservative rabbis, what are these men doing? Or now there are women there too. What are these people doing? They are basically saying, well, we're rabbis, and we could change. We're as authoritative. Who made you authoritative? Who gave you authority? Who gave you the smicha? Who ordained you? We have ordination that goes back 3,500 years to Moshe Rabbeinu at Sinai, rabbi to rabbi, generation to generation, thousands of years. The conservative movement is 150 years old, maybe. So the point being, of course, is that these are the two challenges that Korach made. Korach made the challenge of who's the authority and whose is the authority. If let's say we're not living today, let's say we're living in Moshe Rabbeinu's time and we're living in the time of the giving of the Torah, who's the authority? Of course it's Moshe Rabbeinu. He's the only one who went up to Har Sinai, nobody else did. And he's the only one that came down and taught us what Hashem said. He's the authority. But wait a second. Why is he the authority? Well, for one thing, we know that he has always been there as the leader and as the protector of our people. There's no question that Moshe Rabbeinu's first loyalty is to us. That's one level of trust off the top. He can be trustworthy. Secondly, when Moshe Rabbeinu came down from Har Sinai, it never was ever expressed to aggrandize himself. I am the Son of God. So that's some religious leader might say. Says Moshe Rabbeinu, I'm nothing. I'm a human being like you and me. Except I got the word of God. And you should not worship me. You should not exalt me. You should. Moshe is the most modest man of all time. And that's all I want you to do is listen to the word of Hashem. It's all about Hashem, not me. And thirdly, Moshe Rabbeinu admits freely in his own book that he writes here in the Torah of his own mistakes, of his own crimes, and of his own punishment of not being permitted to go into the Eretz Yisrael. I mean, you can't get more trustworthy, more honest than that. Yes, we believe his word is the word of God. That's the case. All other leaders, all other rabbis, all other prophets must do the same in successive generations. They must not challenge the teachings of Moshe Rabbeinu. If they do, then the Nevi'ei Sheker, they're liars. Hashem says the new rabbi comes, we don't have to eat kosher today anymore. Those laws, God appeared to me in a vision, or I figured it out on my own, whatever, I'm a genius. We don't have to eat kosher anymore. Pork is okay. It was bad in those days, because in those days, the pigs were very dirty, and they brought a terrible disease called trichinosis, and this, that, and that. Therefore, in those days, pork was forbidden. Today, what's the problem? There's nothing wrong with eating pork and being a good Jew. So, obviously, he's not loyal to Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu never gave any provision here about of eating chazir because it's clean or dirty. He can't eat chazir because he can't eat it. End of story. Because God said so. So you get a perspective here of where honesty lies. And frankly, the Torah tells it too. The Torah tells it. I don't know if I can find it. The Torah says about the importance of trying to find. If you have two prophets standing up in front of you, how do you know who's telling you the truth? For that matter, two rabbis come up. So here's Block over here and some other Schmendrick over there. So, sorry, I didn't mean it. Take that back. I don't mean it. I don't want to be insulting. So, how do you know who's telling the truth? How do you know? So, if you'll take a look over here in page 1033. Verse 15. God sends a prophet to Israel. How do you know he's telling the truth? 10:33:15. A prophet from your midst, from your brethren, like me, shall Hashem your God establish for you. To him you shall hearken. You have to listen. That means that in the successive generations, there'll be a leader just like me, who was a prophet, who heard a vision from Hashem, and it'll be just like me. You have to listen to him. According to all that you asked of Hashem your God, in Choreh, that's Har Sinai, in the congregation, I can no longer hear the voice of Hashem, my God, the great fire, I can no longer see, so that I shall not die. And that's the story of the people who heard the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai, and you all know that they all died after the first two statements, because it was overwhelming, the Spirit of Hashem coming upon us, and Hashem then brought us back to life, and Moshe Rabbeinu heard the rest. Everyone knows that. And there was a great fire, and we asked Moshe Rabbeinu to be our emissary, and we trusted him. Then Hashem said, verse 17, they have done well in what they've said. I will establish a prophet for them amongst the brethren like you, and I'll place my words in his mouth. Now there's no prophets today. So who's the prophet today? The rabbi. Or the rabbis, the great leaders. How do you know they're telling the truth if they don't give the word of God? The answer is nowadays, we don't have to have direct vision. What we have is enough information in the Torah and in the commentaries and in the Talmud to work with to figure out logically what needs to be done. And that's what the great leaders do. They spend their whole life sitting and learning all day to figure out what's the right halakha. He shall speak to them everything I will command. 19. And it shall be that the man who will not hearken to my words, and he shall speak in my name, that is who? A liar. He says, I heard from God that we shall no longer keep Shabbat. I will exact from him, I'll punish him. But the prophet who willfully shall speak a word in my name, which I have not commanded him, he's just as bad. Whether you speak in my name that the law's changed, or you speak in my name something that hasn't been commanded, I never said. Or you shall speak in the name of other gods, that prophet shall die. 21 at the bottom. When you say in your heart, how do we know the word that Hashem has not spoken? How do you know the difference between one prophet and the other? Next page. 22. If the prophet will speak in the name of Hashem, and that thing will not occur and not come about, that is the word that Hashem has not spoken. With willfulness has the prophet spoken, you shall not fear him, kill him. In other words, what's the only real test of a real prophet? Yes, he has to be religious. Yes, he has to be righteous. Yes, he has to be devoted, loyal, and a leader. And yes, he has to be scholarly and knowledgeable and everything else. And a holy man, a pious man. But he needs to do one other thing that no one else can do. What's that?
Miracles?
What?
Miracles?
No, the exact opposite. No miracles. Miracles are unacceptable. Anybody can do a miracle. But he tells you what the future will be. He'll tell you what stock to invest in. He'll tell you what the weather report is tomorrow. You see? He has to be able to tell you something in the future. You have to predict. If he can predict accurately, he's a prophet. If he's not predicting accurately, he's a joker. Now,
100%.
what?
100%.
Yeah, he's got 100%.
Not 80%.
Not 80% of rain. 80% chance of rain tomorrow. No, none of that. None of that. I want to know where it's going to rain and when. And at what time of day.
How much?
And how much. That's right. That's exactly what I want to know.
Rabbi,
Yes.
if there were a scenario where a prophet accurately predicted the future, but then told us not to follow Hashem, that's just a test. right?
So, here's where a prophet may tell you, listen carefully, when to change and when not to. If a prophet tells you that this Shabbat we're not permitted to keep, you have to listen to him and you have to violate Shabbat. Why? Because he's not telling you Shabbat is over with. He's not challenging God. He's saying, this particular moment, I got a vision from Hashem. On this particular Shabbat, we got a problem we have to solve. We need to violate. That's called in Hebrew, Hora'at Sha'ah, the instruction for the moment. That instruction shall be listened to. He comes and he tells you Shabbat is no longer relevant forever, then you kill him. Nicely. Nicely. But kill him. Stretch his neck till it's stretched. Now, let's say the prophet tells you, let's temporarily, not permanently, but temporarily worship idols. That's the one temporary that he can't do. That's a Radsha, that's not acceptable. And that person also shall be put to death. The bottom line is that this was the way prophecy worked, and why? Because no one ever got a clearer vision of God's truth than Moshe Rabbeinu. He got close enough to almost see God's face. Panim al panim, mouth to mouth, face to face. On the other hand, all the other prophets saw visions, but not as clear and not fully awake and needed to figure it out and work it out through dreams and so forth. So therefore, all the other prophets relax, guys. Relax. Take it easy, guys. Ladies, sit down. Somebody's fighting? Boyfriend, girlfriend, right?
Well, maybe this is not normal.
I once had a case like this where I was sitting and teaching a class, and I heard those kind of screams. Mama's blood-curdling screams. In fact, I wasn't teaching, I was in the middle of davening. And it really frightened me. And I was coming from the apartment house next door. So I ran up to the apartment house to see what's going on. Brave me, right? You know what they were screaming for? The Lakers had just won the game in the last minute.
You should be proud of the students that they go out and check.
Right. Yeah, if they need counseling, here's my card. And $100 an hour with a reduced discount. The more you scream, the less money it costs you. Rabbi Block, Marriage Counsel Incorporated. But the more you scream, the more sessions it'll cost. It'll cost you a fortune by the time I get through with you guys. All right. Anyway. What?
Just wanted to mention.
What did you want to mention? I'm sorry.
Another story. I just wanted to mention what you said before. That the Reform tried to move.
The Sunday, Shabbos to Sunday, right?
And I heard once that there's a reference in the Torah, a warning that that the day of the idol worshiper is Sunday. It was once mentioned by someone that became a convert who converted.
Maybe in the Talmud.
Maybe in the Talmud, but it's written somewhere. And then some of the Jewish
Probably in the Talmud.
It's a warning, and it's thousands of years old, saying before Christianity existed, we shall know the day of the idol worshiper is Sunday.
That's interesting. I bet you're right about that. I don't know exactly, but I bet you're right. And I'm sure it's a Talmudic statement. In any event, nowadays, prophecy is over. No one is on that higher level to be able to hear a prophetic vision from Hashem. So two rabbis got together in the Talmud and had an argument. What to do? And they argued, this is right, this is the way to do it, and the other rabbi said, this is the way to do it, right? And one rabbi said, if I'm right, a voice will come out of heaven, proving to me that I'm right. And the other rabbi responded and said, that won't prove nothing. Because we live in a time when the voices from heaven do not come out direct. We live in a time when God's presence is hidden. And it takes the challenge of faith to believe in Him and remember, without a clear vision, the absolute truth of Hashem. And therefore, there cannot be this sense of verification from heaven. The only way of verifying true law nowadays is by virtue of the process of Talmudic thinking, reasoning, and logic, which comes originally from Moshe Rabbeinu himself. The loyalty must be to the origin. Jewish religion must be defined as historical or not at all. The only thing that remains to believe is that the same tefillin that we put on, Moshe Rabbeinu put on. And Reformed and secular Jews have challenged that. Basically speaking, Korach's attempt to challenge the halakha was really an attempt to discredit the rabbis. And the singular rabbi that he tried to discredit was Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu is not the sole authority. But who appointed Moshe Rabbeinu? Obviously Hashem. And here's the best part. If you go back to our parsha on page 814, was it? Or 816, right? 820. If you go back, it seems over there that it's going after Aaron HaKohen as well. That in the middle of the class, you can go back to now. They gathered against Moshe Rabbeinu, but look at verse 3. They gathered him Aaron too. What do they want Aaron for? No. What? Can't hear it. Right? Page 821, back to where we are in Parsha Korach. Korach is after Aaron as well. What's he after Aaron for? He's not the leader. He doesn't make the decisions. What is he after Aaron for? Because Aaron, you see, has a very high position. He is known as the Kohen. He's not just known as Moshe's brother. He's the Kohen, Kohen Gadol. And look what it says here. Moshe finally responds. Verse 4, and he falls on his face. His falling on his face is the absolute description of his own personal modesty, his unwillingness to engage in a battle with Korach. So the rabbis talk about what we call legitimate dispute versus illegitimate dispute. Yes, it's okay to argue, and yes, it's okay to fight for a particular position in terms of understanding Jewish law and faithfulness to Jewish law, but it has to be eventually resolved. And if there's a machloket, a dispute between Hillel and Shammai, or Rava and Abaye, or Reb Meir and Reb Shimon, whoever it may be, or Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish, whatever the disputes may be, eventually there's a resolution. Who we paskin like, who we follow. Well, over here, Moshe falls on his face in modesty, as we said. And Korach, finally he responds to Korach. And he says to Korach, in the morning Hashem will make known the one who is his own, and the Holy One, and draw himself close to himself, and whoever he will choose, he will draw close to himself, in verse 5, 823. Bottom line is, actually it's the top line, but the top line of the page, but the bottom line is, The leadership of Moshe and Aaron is a leadership of Hashem's choosing. This is not open to the public for popular election.
Which means Korah is really challenging.
Thank you, Hashem. You bet.
That's the
Says the Chazal, whoever disputes his Rebbe, whoever disputes his teacher, whoever disputes the Talmud Chacham, is disputing Hashem. Because he's the voice of Hashem in our generation. The voice of Hashem in our generation was the great Rav Moshe Feinstein, the great Lubavitcher Rebbe. These were the voices of Hashem in our generation. Who dare dispute? Because if you dispute them, you're disputing God's ambassadors in this earth. You're disputing God. So, he gives a whole session of how to do this. At the bottom, in the middle of the page, look at verse 11, which verifies exactly what you said, Josh. You and your entire assembly are joining together against Hashem, like you said. Furthermore, as for Aaron, what are you protesting against him for? What do you got against him? Is the answer we're angry at the fact that he has this position as if it's given to him by Hashem. One of the real proofs that it's given to him by Hashem is the fact that he wasn't supposed to get it. The Kohen Gadol, Moshe Rabbeinu, was supposed to be both. An issue occurred in which Moshe Rabbeinu had to divest himself from being the Kohen and give it over to his brother by virtue of Hashem's command. But there's no question that Aaron is by God's designation, unquestionably. And that's the case, so is Moshe's. And that's why it's really a dispute against Hashem. In any event, the hour's late, and I don't want to go further more with it, except to simply understand the sense of the dispute is the idea of disputation in of itself. And you have to be able to recognize the difference between a legitimate dispute and an illegitimate dispute. In machloket, l'shem shamayim, for the sake of heaven, and in machloket, shalom l'shem shamayim. That is not for the sake of heaven, but for the sake of personal aggrandizement, personal achievement, personal greatness, and whatever. Now, anyone who's ever been able to have an opportunity to visit Israel during elections will see how much everybody goes after each other. They simply slaughter each other. They shecht each other. You know, this was no good. That was no good. This was no good. That was no good. And there was a result of that. You have this situation of absolute battle, and the people are having this constant personal battle rather than an ideological battle. I never heard a candidate say, my friend, my opponent is a very fine fellow. I'm better. No, he's lousy, he's no good. There's a scandal against him. He's a bum. He's this, he's that. He's had 100 women and 200 million financial scandals and so forth and so on. Which is really irrelevant in the end. I mean, none of these people are of any great moral repute in any event, but the bottom line is, the issues are not being discussed. In the previous election here in the United States with Trump and Clinton, obviously, it also resorted to that kind of garbage. Point is that when you have a machloket, you have to really look inside yourself and say, what's the reason I'm disagreeing here? What's my point? What's my agenda? Is my agenda personal, or is it truly because I want to know what God's word is? How many people are ready to go to a rabbi and ask him a question and be prepared to accept his answer no matter what it is, irrespective of how personally it just doesn't sit with you and makes you uncomfortable? Man comes to the rabbi with a chicken. Rabbi, please take a look at the chicken, tell me the chicken's kosher. Not kosher. You're willing to accept that. You have to be willing to accept that. You have to be willing to hear an answer and submit yourself to the authority and to the answer, even if it's not what you really want to hear. That's called the Shem Shemayim. I want to know the truth. That's called for the sake of heaven. I really want to know the truth. And the idea of being able to hear the truth and is really the source of the problem of Korach. What's Korach's problem? Korach's problem is that he wants to create anarchy within the group. By creating anarchy, he says, everybody's holy, everybody can be prime minister, everybody can be Moshe Rabbeinu, so can I, so can anybody. Now, people then begin to say, well, Moshe Rabbeinu's authority is undermined. We don't listen to him. And frankly, some other guy will come up and they'll say, what makes you worthy? And what's the other guy worthy? And all of a sudden you got chaos all over the place. Well, this is really what is called, in modern terms, the festering of the Russian Revolution. In the early 1900s, when the Tsar's policies became really unlivable in Russia, so the Soviets and the Communists and the Trotskyites and all the rest of the gangs and bandits sought to take over control. But the way they did it was to create anarchy in the streets. To create the kind of anarchy that who knows who to trust who? Are you going to rat on me? Am I going to rat on you? Who can you trust? Who's a part of this country, or this party? Who's part of that party? And who's a communist and who's not a communist? All of a sudden, the country declares war or declares the destruction of the Tsar is shot in 1905. And communism does not take full control of the country till 1917. What did Russia do for 12 years? They lived in bloodbaths. Everyone's afraid of the other. Killings. The whites versus the reds, and the reds versus the whites. And children were being sent out to the front and being killed and slaughtered like cattle. The entire Russian front, the entire Russian continent was filled with that kind of misery and destruction. You were lucky if you stayed alive during that period of time. If you didn't have affiliation, who knows who you'd catch, who'd catch you. And eventually, it became that the countryside of people, the population said, we need someone to save us from total self-destruction. In walked Lenin, followed by Stalin, and said, I will be your savior. And of course he was. Except he forgot to tell them that in being your savior and taking over the country, I'm also the dictator. I'm also running the show. And anyone who opposes me, I'll kill him as quickly as all the other deaths that were occurring here beforehand. And so that Russia came to law and order, but it came to a law and order of total singular mind and thought that no longer could you express your ideas. It was a total communist dictatorship. That's what Korach wanted. Korach wanted to take over the people, and you don't trust this guy, you don't trust that guy. Who says who's holy, who's more holy? He's holy, he's holy, he's God, he listens to God, he talks to God. And everybody's, and that's what he's going around the crowd talking about and telling everybody to stop with this craziness. The authorities in Moshe Rabbeinu. Anybody can be prime minister. What did the communists say? The communists said, you know, the great era of Russian aristocracy with those that were close to the Tsar and wealthy is over. And everybody's equal. Everybody's holy, says Korach. We're all equal. And everybody has the same amount of money. And no one has more. There's no rich, there's no poor. It's just the working class. That's what communism taught. Commune. To an extent, the kibbutz that the early Zionists fostered in Israel were modeled after that role of everybody's equal. And there's no special status to anybody. And we all have equal rights in the big communal dining room, and down went the family. There's no family structure in the kibbutz. All the men went to bed, the women with the women, the children, and maybe they had a little bit of time for themselves within the period of time of maybe a little bit during a given day. The whole idea of this insanity was what Korach tried to create, and in so doing, the rebellion was clearly to eventually get himself appointed as the leader. By saying everybody's holy, then everybody's equal. If everybody's equal, somebody's got to lead. Here I am. And that was Korach's whole idea. The first establishment of a dictatorship was Korach's. Self-appointed, in control of everyone, putting down everyone who opposes him, and putting them down with violence if necessary. And that's what Korach sought to do. It's interesting that he had the tribe of Reuven with him, as it says in the beginning of the passage. The fact that the tribe of Reuben was with him was because the way they were camped in the desert was in a circle. And in the circle, there were 4 directions: north, east, west, and south. And in each of those directions, 3 tribes camped. There were 3 tribes here, 3 here, 3 here, and 3 here, for a total of 12. In the middle of the circle was also 4 camps, north, east, west, and south. One camp was for the one tribe of Levi. They were in the inner part. The next one was the second tribe of Levi, and the third was the third tribe of Levi, and the fourth was Moshe and Aaron. What's interesting is that Korach comes from Kahos. Kahos is the son of Levi. Levi is one of those tribes. Levi had 3 tribes, we said. One of them was Kahos. But if you think of the diagram that I just showed you, the inner and the outer of those 4 directions, the inner of the direction of, I believe it was the north. The inner of the tribe of the north was, the inner was Kahos, where Korach lived. And the outer of the same direction was, was Reuben. Which direction was that? The direction was to the south. So to the south on the inner part lived Kahos. To the south on the outer part lived Reuben. Why did Korach, the son of Kahos, was he able to bring Reuben into his dispute and into his argument and into this fight? Oy l'shcheno, oy l'shcheno. Woe unto you if you got a bad neighbor. So you don't hang around bad people. You hang around bad people and they get slept in. But one guy didn't get slept. And that was a guy named On Ben Pelet. The reason we mention On Ben Pelet is because he was saved. Why was he saved? Because his wife told him not to join. Listen to your wife. What did she tell him? She said, Korach's asking you to join this thing. Right? And who's going to end up the big shot of this thing? Not you. You're going to be an underling. Just like you are right now. Nothing's going to improve. He'll become the boss man. And you'll be a nothing just like you are today. Don't you see through him? She saw through him. He didn't. But he listened to her. Smart man. So he was saved. In any event, the rebellion continues with a major discussion of which Moshe Rabbeinu determines who will be the one that will be chosen, will be based upon the fact that he predicts, Moshe Rabbeinu predicts, that tomorrow there will be a event that will occur that has never been seen before, that will be so unusual in the destruction of the evil that it will absolutely guarantee who the truth resides with. And so he says in 8:25, Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu and he said, separate yourself from this assembly and I will destroy them in an instant. That means to say, once again, if you hang around with bad people, you're going to get hurt. You live in a bad neighborhood, you're going to be schlepped into their crimes. Therefore, everybody knows that you should live in a good neighborhood, in a Jewish neighborhood, and you'll be in with a shul in its midst, and then a nice community of good people and good families. Then you'll be that same way. But if an evil group is happening, even if you're not part of that, but you're near them, you're in trouble. Says the Torah, He budlu, separate yourself, get away from them. So, verse 23. Hashem told Moshe, get yourselves up from all around the dwelling places of Korach, Dosan, Aviram. 25. Moshe stood up and he spoke to the assembly in 26 and he said, turn away from these wicked men. Do not touch anything of theirs, lest you perish because of their sins. So they got up, everyone got away from Korach, Dosan, Aviram, all around them. And Moshe said the following in 8:27, verse 28. Through this shall you know that Hashem has sent me to perform all these acts, that it was not from my heart. I was chosen. 29. If these people will die like the death of all men, of regular people, and the destiny of all men is visited upon them, then it's not Hashem who sent me. If they die regularly from illness or from old age or whatever it is, then you can be sure that I haven't been sent from Hashem. But if Hashem will create a phenomenon, and the earth will open its mouth and swallow them, and all that is theirs, and they will descend alive to the pit, you shall know that these men have provoked Hashem, and I am the truth. When he finished speaking, the ground was under them and split open. The earth opened its mouth, swallowed them and their households, and all the people who were with Korach and their entire wealth. Don't stick around in that neighborhood, because you'll be swallowed up. We talked about that in the earthquake of 1994. The earthquake of 1994. No, he remembers that probably.
Northridge.
Anybody old enough here to remember 94? Northridge. Everybody knows also that Northridge is the center in the United States for pornography. Think twice.
One of the punishments coming now, like to Europe and Germany, with all the Muslims terrorizing.
Right.
So I talked to some Germans, but the people I said, if you consider yourself a good person, you need to move away because it's punishment.
That's right. You got to get out of there. Yeah, and that's a fact. Even during the war, World War II, and the Germans, let's say, did not participate in the atrocities against Jews. But when the Allies came and bombed Germany, they bombed indiscriminately everybody. All of Israel, in verse 34, fled. They were afraid the earth would swallow them. Why was there an earthquake? Why is it an earthquake that does the trick of destroying these people? Why is it that kind of sin that specifically is earmarked for people who are argumentative for their own purpose and cause that kind of division and that kind of discontent and that kind of anger and that kind of fighting with each other that causes so much destruction? And the answer is because of a pasuk in Tehillim. Tehillim says, Emet me'eretz titzmach. Truth emanates from the earth. What does that mean? It means basically our world is based upon the truth of Hashem, in which the way it functions reflects the truth of Hashem. And frankly, as long as we pursue that truth, the world continues to function in its normative fashion. But if chas v'shalom that is threatened or challenged, then you challenge the underpinnings of the earth. You challenge the very foundation of existence. You put the whole world in jeopardy from one drastic, one disaster or another. And the disaster of an earthquake is a basic disaster of destruction because it can destroy all around and it can harm all of existence. And as the fault ripples, it can, who knows how long, to what extent, that fault will ripple and to how far it'll reach. Certainly reach over here in the East Valley for sure in 94. But I think the point is that once again you sense that absolute foundation upon which the world stands. Whenever we see disasters, we hear about them all the time. There's a big fire consuming 20 miles of 20 acres of air, and many people have been forced to evacuate their homes, and there's a tsunami, and there's a great disaster of this, right? And in New York, one guy told me his car was buried under 10 feet of water. The water receded, the engine was dead. The point is that you really there's something you can do about that. Medical health is not, disasters are the kind of things that are caused by by a discord that leads to disaster in any event, just like it led to disaster in Soviet Russia. And there's no difference between two jets flying into the Twin Towers and the 12 years of discord in the Soviet Union between 1905 and 1917, in which you had no centralized government and no law and order anyway. It's like the Wild West. Whoever picks up, they say that the fastest draw wins, and that was the old West. You can't live in that kind of society. If you make it through, it's a miracle. And there isn't a family that doesn't have one tragedy over another. Talk about that in terms of terrorism, and realize that terrorism is the same thing. There has to be a unified stance of people against the evil. Moshe Rabbeinu takes that stand, and he warns everyone else to stand with him, because there's no dispute between him and Korach. The dispute between Korach within himself. And frankly, that's what the Mishnah says. The Mishnah says, a machloket l'shem shemayim, a true dispute, sincerely, Hillel and Shammai. Two great rabbis argued with each other, we do it this way, we do it that way, and eventually they worked it out who they follow. And in most cases, Hillel, in certain cases, Shammai. But it was worked out to the extent, if let's say Hillel says that you need a pruta to marry a woman, and a value of a pruta, and Shammai says no, you need a more expensive value of a dinar. Well, according to Shammai, then a man who marries the woman with a pruta is really not married. The whole society goes crazy. I am married. It's a legitimate marriage, not a legitimate marriage. How do you able to establish a standard of how to live? Is the answer. Eventually, Shammai admitted, even though I maintain my position and I do not back down on it, for the purpose of unity, we'll all follow Hillel. And that's really how you govern and legislate the proper Jewish law. Even though I might have a different opinion, the bottom line is this is what it's got to be. So the Klal Yisrael remains unified in its basic of performances. Is there other differences that can be maintained? Certainly. The Ashkenaz do it, pray this way, and the Sephardic pray this way, but everybody prays. And everybody prays 3 times a day. Everybody prays Shemona Esrei, and then the Kriyat Shema and so forth. Exactly how it's done with all the details. So there's a dispute between the Hasidim and the Mitnagdim. And that's okay. We can live with that. But, says Rav Moshe Feinstein, if let's say you're a Sfard and you're davening and you're praying in an Ashkenaz service, then you have to follow the Ashkenaz. And let's say you're Ashkenaz and praying in a Sephardic service, then you have to follow the Sephardic. Because you should not stand out and be a disputant. You may be allowed to maintain your own position, your own custom, the custom of your fathers, minhag avotenu biyadenu. But at the same time, there has to be respect for the congregation that you're living in or living with. And that has to be done in a way in which there is a certain level of respect. So, therefore, we have a situation here of a machloket shelo l'shem shemayim, a dispute that was not in the best interest of anyone sincerely. No one really. It wasn't Moshe. The Mishnah says the machloket of Hillel and Shammai is a machloket l'shem shemayim for the sake of heaven. But the machloket that's not l'shem shemayim was Korach. But it doesn't say Korach versus Moshe. It says Korach and his group. Why? Because Moshe wasn't in dispute with him. I'm not going to argue with you. I'm not going to dignify you with a legitimate opinion. I'm not even going to respond to you. I'll fall on my face. You didn't deserve my response. Hashem will make the decision who's right and who's wrong in this case. Point is that Moshe Rabbeinu was not an arguer with Korach. Hillel was with Shammai. Shammai was with Hillel. But Moshe had nothing to do with it. It was Korach all by himself. When you want to argue with everybody and anybody, including yourself. And that's the bottom line. And that's why the Korach is the Russia that he is and causes this kind of dispute in the Klal Yisrael. It has become to this very day our personal curse. And we need to be conscious of it. We need to be aware that people someone goes to Beit Knesset, Shabbat, and he prays and this and that, makes a few friends, this and that, and all of a sudden one day he gets into an argument with somebody. He says, you were called up to the Torah this week. I wasn't called up. Where's my kavod? How come you get kavod? And they get into a big argument. And such a big argument that he says, I will never go back to the shul again. So what shul do you go to? The other shul. But you live in a community where there is no other shul. I'll build one! Just to make sure I have a place to go. All by myself. It brought us to ridiculous. We have the need to fight for unity, to fight for working together and being together. Rashi says an amazing thought. Rashi says, when they came to Mount Sinai, the people camped there, and the Torah uses the singular. Not they camped, he camped. Well, the Jewish people camped, but they camped as a he, as a singular person. Says Rashi, ki ish echad b'lev echad. Like one heart and one mind, one person. The unity was unusual for the Jewish people, unusual in the history of mankind, at Mount Sinai. Nobody disputed what happened at Mount Sinai. Everybody agreed with that. Of course, the interesting thing is that Rashi also points out, must admit, that all the other times that the Jewish people camped in different places, there was dispute and there was arguments. The one place where there wasn't was, thank God, Mount Sinai. On one thing, there's no dispute. God appeared at Mount Sinai and gave the Torah. Of that, there is no question. Now, tragically, we have a situation where today, you have groups that dispute that. Well, I'm not sure everything here is the Word of God, this and that, blah, blah, blah. And you have, again, these various divergent groups. And one must be very careful not to fall into this habit of fighting in which you question the legitimate authority of rabbinical, historical, and scholarly Judaism for groups that are 150 years old who claim they're Jewish, and while they may be Jewish, what they're practicing is not Judaism at all. And you can't be fooled by that. Somebody came to me the other day and said to me, they started my classes, and they want an Orthodox conversion. I said, okay. I don't, if you want to have an opportunity to learn, I welcome you. Come and learn. Of course, we don't make it easy around here, as you well know, but we'd always welcome you. Then the person, maybe 3 or 4 months down the line, went over to the conservatives and got a conservative conversion. The person comes back to me, tells me about it. I said, okay, it was nice knowing you. No, he says, I want to come back to classes. Really? Before? Well, I want an Orthodox one too. What do we have? A collective conversion? Then how many conversions do you want? 3, 4, 5, 6, 3 for the price of one. I mean, what do you want here? What's going on here? The guy says, well, I just took this one just in case that maybe you might not find me comparable, might find my acceptable. I said, well, certainly now I don't find you acceptable after you did this. That was the stupidest thing you could have done. Now, here's a question. What did they ask you at the conversion ceremony? What kind of interview did you have? Well, they asked a few things here and there, How long did it take? About 20 minutes. Okay, interesting. So we take about an hour plus, in which we ask you questions and details and laws and observances, and you have to accept all of them and be prepared to live a full life as a Jew. They didn't ask you all that stuff. No, it was a little bit easier. Well, then, it's not real, is it? It's not accurate. So what really comes out is these divergent groups are not only disputing halakha and disputing authority, but they're also guilty of misinforming and guilty of mislabeling and guilty of misidentifying. I can't find the right word. A what? Misrepresent. There you go. Who said that? An Israeli? Oh, holy cow. Misrepresent. He's right. They misrepresent. He's absolutely right. And that's a tragedy, because Korach misrepresented the people. And of course, people buy into that. So, when you go to the conservative temple on a Saturday morning, would you find a whole bunch of people? Yes, you will. Fools. Victims. People who are led astray by people who either don't know any better or do know better, but that's where they keep their jobs. Fact of the matter is that the greatest fortune of a reformed conservative rabbi is that he knows more, that his congregation knows less than he does. He doesn't know a whole lot in the first place. His congregation knows nothing. So therefore he's got a job. The reality is that you have to be very careful and very vigilant. And it is not our intent to discredit them as Jewish people, but it is our intent to realize that what they're presenting or misrepresenting, as you say, what is Judaism, is just inaccurate. And you have to be able to sense that truth to be able to get to it. That's a disputation that shalom l'shem shemayim. It's not for the sake of having to seek out the truth. Yes.
I was just say that also every Orthodox rabbi can trace the teaching lineage back to Moshe Rabbeinu.
That's right.
himself,
That's
and
right.
They
They
can't.
can't.
Every
can't.
Orthodox rabbi can quintessentially research.
That's exactly true.
the reputation.
One of the champions of Orthodox Jewry in the last half of the 19th century, 1800s, was a man in Germany named Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch. Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch fought particularly against the Reformed and sought to do everything they could in order to establish the primacy of halachic living. He was the champion at that time for us. Fact of the matter is that the Reform went so far as to say that they really aren't Jewish anymore, but they really are Germans of the Mosaic persuasion. What does that mean, Mosaic persuasion? Funny thing about it is that they sought really to be Germans to equal everybody else. And while they thought they accomplished that, World War II proved differently, didn't it? Ultimately, it's really also an identity as a Jew, because the Reform movement had a whole lot of trouble accepting the legitimacy of the state of Israel, believing that the Jewish people should stay in their own countries, wherever they may be, particularly the United States. And again, while we are gracious guests and grateful to our hosts of the United States, our land remains the land of Israel. And that's a message that, again, has to be recorded as accurate Torah teachings. The land of Israel hasn't changed geography. It's still where it is in the Middle East. It hasn't moved anywhere to any other continent. And these are the things that you have to be on guard for and watch out for these kind of arguments. And again, the response oftentimes cannot be a strong one, because Moshe Rabbeinu himself fell on the floor. He had nothing to say to the guy. You can't enter into that kind of dialogue or argument, because in the end of the day, you're giving them legitimacy, even allowing to argue with them, and that you can't afford to do. There is a large body of rabbis in Los Angeles called the Southern California Board of Rabbis. Moshe Feinstein issued a ruling that said that no Orthodox rabbi may join that group. And to this day we don't, because we cannot recognize the legitimacy of their teachings. And so that's why, again, you have to be very careful and don't be swayed by the easiness of conversion that they provide or offer, and to realize that the real truth is the truth of adhering to the halakha, adhering to the spirit of the law, to the letter of the law, to the rulings, however small or minute they may sound, and to be that careful with it to the extent that we follow the authority of authorized leaders, authorized rabbanim, authorized talmidei chachamim and teachers. And the lesson of Korach is to teach us to be wary of these kind of disputes and to work within ourselves together to maintain chaniyah achat, one camping, kishachad b'lev, to work on the issues of not fighting amongst ourselves, but rather to stay together. And even though we all have differences, we learn to get along, we learn to work with each other, learn to respect one another for all our differences, and to do so under the scope of one singular teaching, the teachings of the Torah. A good Shabbos, everyone, and enjoy a wonderful weekend.